Dear listeners, welcome back to the show again. Today I'm very happy and honored to have a guest who is similar to me. So I teach the Bible, she teaches the Bible, and we'll get to interact and just for you to get a perspective of how people learn the Bible from the other side of the world, all right? And we'll get to learn about Jesus Christ. You hear my voice and then you hear her voice, and I like it because it's like two churches are meeting together and we are getting to commune together that kind of way. So there are some things which she will talk to share with you, and then and you can learn. You know, it's all about learning and getting perspectives, and ultimately getting that belief and faith in Jesus Christ. All right. So welcome to the show, Miss Cassian Bellino.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, all right, all right. Please do tell us something about yourself and. Yeah, the platform is yours. I know you are me, so I won't talk much.
Yeah, I'm really blessed to have a ministry called Biblically Speaking. I started it in October of 2023, but to be honest, it started really in the fall of 2018 because I was raised in the church. I had a very Christian family, and I'm the youngest of three other siblings. Like everything that we talked about went back to God, and yet I was an adult and I didn't know God, and I was very lukewarm, and I was so okay with my sin. And I just kind of realized, once I exited college and I was living abroad, and I was at the time living in Thailand, and I love Thailand. That's such a beautiful country. I was so far from home. And so I knew that I needed to decide for myself who I wanted to be. And I knew I wanted to be a Christian woman, but if I'm being honest with myself, I wasn't. Like I was living in sin happily. And so I remember going to church in Thailand and just kind of wishing that I had a certain resource, that I had somebody that could explain the Bible to me, like in context. And, like, who is John? We'd read the book of John in church, and I'd be like, well, how old is John? And where is he living? And what does he do for work? And if he existed
Is he
today,
still
like,
alive?
no, I wasn't that theologically sound.
Ah.
But it was like, if he existed today, what would he be like? And I was so early in that Christianhood of like, give me context so I can visualize who he'd be, so I can
Mhm.
actually relate, versus just kind of like, oh, that's what it says. I accept it. And, and so I went to my pastor and I even asked her, I was like, hey, before we jump into the word, can you provide some context? And she was like, you should just go to Bible study. And I was like, I am going to Bible study. And she's like, okay, then you should go to seminary. And I was like, I'm not going to go to seminary. Like, I work in tech. Like, I have a job. And so it felt like I had an option there. I could either like go to seminary, or I could just remain being confused. And I
Mhm.
knew that I wanted to be Christian, but in order for me to be like fully in love with God, I need to know him. So
Yes.
who's going to explain this to me? Because I'm terrible at going to school. Someone has to just explain it to me. And I remember joking about this with a friend at lunch, just saying like, I just wish there was a podcast with like a smart person and a funny person, and they just explained the Bible. And like it was like that was the seed, because after that,
That's me.
God just worked on my heart for 5 years, and he
Mhm.
like brought books into my life. I was never reading Christian literature. He brought the coolest books that I, as a lukewarm Christian, loved. The Book of Longing by Sue Monk Kidd. I love that book. Redeeming Love. I love that book. A Crazy Love by Francis Chan. So those books changed my perspective. Like it's changed how I saw God. And I just remember being like, God, if you are as cool as they say, let me see that, because then I'll have no argument against how cool you are. Just like show me. Don't make it seem like an obligation to love you. Make it the only logical solution. And he just did that. He just brought me conversations. He brought books into my life. He brought me into a Bible study. And I had this qualm with Bible studies. I thought Bible studies were meant to teach me about the Bible. And I think Bible studies instead are just great communities of prayer warriors and people that can love on one another. And God brought me into the coolest Bible study that my sister hosted, and he showed me what true prayer warriors looked like. And these women just held me so accountable in like this transitional part of my life. And And then God gave me a vision in the middle of this breakup. Like God was just like moving in my life where I'm like, okay, God, where do you want me to go next? I can move to this place or this place. And, if you want me to move to Hawaii, make it so clear, meet my three conditions. And he met all of them. And so I moved out here. And that was 5 years after that initial conversation about needing a podcast. And like I was looking for the podcast. Like I said that knowing, thinking it'll exist. Like that's not like a crazy idea. Like clearly, like that podcast will exist. Couldn't find it. I looked on YouTube. I was trying to watch like videos. I was listening to all the Bibles, and they were just too like emotional, or they were too testimony based, or it's too like, oh, today I love Jesus, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like, let's
Yeah.
get
Or too
into it.
Catholic as well. Yeah.
Too? Did you say too cuddly?
No, Catholic, like priest.
Catholic.
I found one like that as well. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah, Catholic. And like I'm Orthodox, I'm Protestant, but I'm not Catholic. So I'm just like there's so many parts about the Catholic faith that I just don't understand. So it was hard to like learn even like what questions to ask. And I moved out here, and so I remember kind of like lamenting, I guess, to my sister like, I still haven't found that podcast. And Maggie, my sister, she's just so amazing. She was like, well, why maybe God wants you to start it. And she was just so, and I was like, whoa, wrong girl. Like, girl, you saw me in college. Like, I should not, me? You, like, I am the worst representative of the Christian faith. Like, that'll make it look bad. And I just would be like, I bet the wrong girl. Like, just give me the podcast, God. Just give me the podcast. Like, I want to learn about you, God, but like, don't make me make it. Like, I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't know any guests. I'm not even like a good person. And like every single thing that I like came to him with, he just like gave me a solution. And it got to a point where I was talking to this girl who showed me exactly how to make a podcast. They make it so easy, thank God. And he was like, "Listen, I don't think God wants you to make a podcast. I think God just wants to hang out with you. And so
Yeah.
he's giving you this idea. So maybe just hang out with him." And
Mhm.
that's it. I'm like, why didn't he just say that?
Yeah.
And so I just started like truly, he gave me guests, he gave me software that was easy to use, he gave me
Mhm.
topics. Like I had so many questions that I had. And then we just started. And so now that's what it's been for now 2 years. And it's just questions that I think most Christians have. And I try to like,
Mhm.
outsource questions. So I'm not just asking my own, but what how to explain this? Why is there so much blood in the Old Testament? Why is God so violent in the Old Testament? Can the
Mhm.
entire world history that we're taught in science class fit inside the Bible? Like what's going on with these like angels? Where do they come from? What about demons? What is hell like? What's going on in Revelation? Explain it simply. These are questions that I think we've all thought about. Like the whole thing is, I wish I could raise my hand in church. Because the pastor or the priest or they talk about things, and you're like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so that's where I hope to, in these conversations, I sit down with PhDs, theologians, scholars, and I just ask these questions as if we're like having dinner together and try to keep it as surface level, but also theologically sound as possible. And like, it has changed my life. Like, that's no understatement. Like, it has absolutely changed my heart posture. It has changed my passion. It has changed my purpose. Like the word of God is so undeniably interesting and deep and unfathomable. And the more I learn about it, the more interesting it gets. And the larger God's love for us gets. So you'd think that the deeper you get, the more confusing it gets, or the more contradictions you would find. But honestly, like the deeper I go, the more I'm like, whoa, I'm a part of this heritage of Christian faith that is so much bigger than I thought. I gave my life to Christ at Bible camp in like fourth grade. Like when I said yes, I had no idea what was in store. So biblically speaking, that's really it. And we try to talk about everything. I've had a messianic priest on, I've had an Orthodox priest on, but a lot of Protestants, a lot, Calvinists. I've had a couple Catholics on, and so it's so vast, and a lot of people don't agree on things, and that's okay. Even in those moments, we see like, wow, we this faith is big enough that we can both fit our opinions in it. Versus like they're so contradictory. Like I really haven't found that.
Wow. Uh, uh, you know, sorry, I always try and process the question.
Yeah, it's like what was the question again?
I've noticed something interesting about my guests from that North America. They talk and then suddenly keep quiet. What? So, so I'm flowing. So the first thing I want to look at is whether my internet. I'm in Africa, man. So I gotta check my net. Is the data well? Is it, if I disappear, just give me 5 minutes. I will not edit this part. Just give me 5 minutes to get backup data. It's Africa. It is Africa. I just want to loosen up my audience, so, that kind of thing. But anyway, so it's amazing, and it's what the journey that you started and you ended up with a podcast is somehow similar to mine, and we are just amazed by the fact that in all of that land, just tell us when you started your podcast, which is biblically speaking, which year was it?
2023.
2023. That's like 2 years ago. All right. So by that time, by the time you are starting, oh, I'm sure you must have looked around and checked whether there were similar podcasts, talking about the Bible the way you are doing it. Were there similar people doing the same thing you're doing around you?
I mean,
No,
probably,
mhm.
but
But
not in the way that I needed it.
not in the way that you needed it. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
it
All
was
right.
like too. Yeah, I thought you said cuddly earlier, but that's such a good word. Like it was either like too academic, like
Yes.
Catholic, and
Yes. It's very
so
very theological. Yes. Yes. Yes.
very theological, or it was like
Mhm.
too emotions based and like how do I
Mhm.
feel and what does this verse mean to me today? And looking back, like I think that works for community. I think that
Mhm.
works in feeling the Holy Spirit, but I wasn't craving that. I wanted explanations.
You wanted to understand the verses themselves. Why was Moses holding the rod? Why did God, do this thing to Moses? Why
Right.
did the why? Anyway, and then that gives us the gap that we have, and you have honest questions which needed honest answers, and it's so amazing the way there was no avenue for you to learn. And why I was interested with your profile is because of the journey that you had to go all the way around. PhDs, PhD, just for you to stumble upon. All right, I got to do it on my own. But now that you are here and you are doing it, we are doing this biblically speaking podcast. Uh, what is the how can I say this? Wha- You said you started with you approached a minister of God, and then they suggested you to go to seminary, that kind of thing. But now, how can I say this? Do you do you still have a connection with a physical church, or you're still running standalone?
No, no, I love my church here. I have a church that I go to here in Hawaii that I got baptized at about a year ago, like just
Yeah.
rebaptized as an adult to be like, this is like, I'm different, and I want this to be representative of that. And I love my local church. It's so amazing. And the pastor is so amazing. He's so exegetically sound and is getting his master's in this and like gets really excited about explaining the verses, not just like preaching. And I
Yes.
love my church.
What's the name of the church?
It's new, but it's called The House Established, and
Oh,
it's based in Waimanalo, and they just opened another like one in town. So on the island, you like the different parts of the island. So they have two locations now, and it's just exploding. Like it is insane the hunger for God on this island, and how many people like flock to this church. It's the coolest thing. I've lived in a lot of places, but Hawaii is so like community based and
yes.
openly Christian and like openly trying to be bettering each other's lives in your own, like even in the faith space, not just like, oh, like physically or academically or professionally, but like in your faith, like people are young and hungry for the Lord here.
Yeah, I guess I mentioned to her that I was a fan of Magnum Pie and Hawaii Five O, and I just wanted to get. How long does it take to travel from one end of the island to the other? How to the other end?
Maybe like an hour.
That's a tiny land in a way. But the culture of Hawaii people is more traditional, and they are very together. That kind of thing. And when when you find a group of them of people who are saved, then the thing of togetherness continues, and the fellowship becomes really amazing. And I'm really happy about it. So now, so you have a contact between the church and yourself, and so in short, you have a place where you can always feel up, where you can always be, refreshed when you go there on a Sunday, and then you find enough, content, if I may, spiritual content to come and teach in your podcast, isn't it? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I guess I don't get the content for the podcast in my church.
Hmm.
I think it's more the podcast has helped my church experience because these are just like conversations I'm having with scholars. I sit down and I
Correct.
say like, what is the unseen realm? Explain that to
Yes.
me. It's like, oh, like Ephesians 6, like principles and, dominions, like what are those? I'm like, kings? Like, wait, when I first heard like powers and principalities and dominions, I'm
Hmm.
like, different regions and kings and governments, right? And he's like, no, there's like authorities in the unseen realm that Jesus goes and sees when he, descends into hell after after he's crucified. And that context blew my mind. And then you go to church and you see these like references of like we're at war. And I think before I started the podcast, I'm like, yeah, we're at war. What does that mean? That's just like a pastor talk. But then
Yes.
you learn like, no, we are at war. There is an
Mhm.
unseen realm that we are actively fighting against. And if you're not fighting against it, you're a part of it or you're a victim to it. And it transformed my ability to go to church. And like I love this conversation. We talk about the bleeding woman in Mark.
Mhm.
Dr. James Sedlicek, one of the smartest people I have ever met in my life. I've had him on my show so many times, and he approached me. And usually I kind of let my guests tell me what they're experts in. And I say, oh, the bleeding woman. I don't think I have a lot of questions about her because it's like two verses in scripture. And he's like, no, the bleeding woman is all over the Old Testament. Let's talk about it. And so we have the conversation, and I'm kind of like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And he's like, the bleeding woman isn't just four lines. It's a woman who reached out in faith because she knew Torah. Here are
Mhm.
three examples in the Old Testament that she is thinking about when she reaches out and touches the corner of Jesus's cloak. Not to
Yes.
mention like what happens right before and after the bleeding woman. It's insane. But then I go to church and we talk about the bleeding woman. And I always call it the Sunday school mentality of like what you've learned and how it sticks. You just like don't go that deep. And my Sunday school mentality of the bleeding woman was, okay, Jesus has a magic cloak. If I saw Jesus back then and you touched him, you're healed. You're good to go. Every ailment is gone. That's what that story was about, right? The bleeding woman touched him and she stopped bleeding. And that's not what it is. And then I went to church and my pastor brought up the bleeding woman. And I was
Mhm.
just like, knowing everything about the Old Testament that she knew and Jewish cleanliness laws and all these things, I was just like in church, like riveting of just like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, so it's not like the church kind of influences the podcast. It's more like this podcast has been such base material that when I go to church, it's so much more valuable and I enjoy it so much more.
That's amazing. Then you feel at least you don't need to go. I don't know. You feel fulfilled by the fact that you have a church that is near you, and you don't feel alone because what you're doing is somehow a ministry. And when you started it, you didn't have. So right now you feel as if you're complete, if I may, isn't it? I think
Complete? I don't know
that,
about that.
I don't know, but I think you've answered the question in a way which makes us feel that the church there is more or less not failing you, or rather, it is more or less, you are at one with it in a way, okay, and you enjoy
Yeah,
it. That kind of thing.
I don't know about
Does that
you,
make
but
sense?
like when I approached the pastor, like
Hmm.
way back then, and I was like, explain John,
Yeah.
I had the expectation that a pastor knows everything about the Bible because
Okay.
you think you go to church and a pastor is the expert in Bible. So if I have any questions in my faith, I can go to my pastor, and if anybody knows, they would know. And that's just simply not true. That's
Hmm.
something that I have learned in
Okay.
this journey that when it comes to becoming a pastor or a scholar, the educational requirements are a lot more limited than you would think. just because you go to seminary and there's like four or five different categories you can focus on, and it's either Old Testament or New Testament, but it's not both. And so
Mm.
the curricular requirements for Old Testament, it's like 400 hours, the ancient languages, the history, the translations, everything. New Testament, do you want to be a pastor? Okay, you're going to learn leadership. You're going to learn communication. You're also going to learn like one ancient language, and then you're going to learn like the Gospels. But you're not going to learn the Old Testament. And so it's a big ask. I learned, and I didn't know this, it's a big ask to go to your pastor and be like, how does this relate? Like they're not able, because they were never expected. But as like
Mm.
that was just a miscommunication, like a misunderstanding for me. And so I had these misplaced expectations on my pastor to be able to explain the whole Bible. And they were like, I don't know. And I was like, you're failing me. And that's how I
Yes.
almost felt like abandoned as a churchgoer. But that's not their job. Like simply said, that's not what they're supposed to. And the reason I say Dr. James Sedlicek is the smartest person I've ever met is because he has done Old Testament and New Testament education. So he's doubled his workload. And so he can cross reference all of these verses in the Old Testament and New Testament and historical and translations. Like it's such an amazing gift to be able to talk to somebody like him and talk to him.
Well answered. Well answered. Well answered. Well answered. Just tell us now. Let's talk about your podcast, and because I want to drive people to connect with you, especially in the area of Hawaii and anywhere around the world. Because
Yeah.
why I love this conversation is because of the inquiry, the inquisitive nature of you want to know God. You want to know God. You want to understand this thing for yourself. And when you have understood it for yourself, you want to help people digest it and understand it the right way. And that becomes amazing. Right. So tell us about your podcast and where we can find it and how it flows. How
Okay.
does it flow? So we want to give people a reason to, this is not a corporate, as I mentioned before. It's a kingdom of God, and it's not like we are stealing people. Don't follow this one. Don't follow. No, people are different, and
Yeah.
people have a lot of questions, and people get answers in different. That's why there are many churches, and in one street you can find 10 churches. It's allowed. There's no competition. It's like God is everywhere. So tell us about the flow of your podcast. All right,
Yeah, I like
so
that
people can
example of that
understand.
one street
Yeah.
has many churches. I like
Yes,
that a
yes,
lot.
yes. It's a
Uh,
fact. It's a physical thing. The drums on Sunday, this one. So you choose where you want to go and fit in. Yeah. So tell us about it.
yeah, I mean, if this is the way that you like to learn, the way that it works for me is
Yeah.
I bring on a scholar. The scholar
Mhm.
has at least a PhD, and
At least a
if
PhD.
at least a PhD, sometimes
I'm
multiple.
a lucky person. I'm a lucky person. That's why the screens are inverted. I'd never be a guest on this show. A PhD. My degree is in. I have a degree in. This is called. I don't know. What's the name of that degree? BBIT, Bachelor Business Information Technology. I'm from an IT background. I have no theology. I did. My God. So at least a PhD.
At least a PhD.
Uh-huh.
That's so funny. And sometimes
Why?
it's a PhD. It's not even a PhD in like theological studies or biblical studies or hermeneutics. Sometimes it's like PhD in astrophysicism, in physics,
Mhm.
astrophysics, or
Yes.
mathematics, and those are the conversations I love. I've had conversations where it's like, "Hey, you're a Catholic, let's talk about Legion." The structure is this is the verse, this is how I understood it. How should I understand it? And then they add
Mhm.
all that context, those timelines, those conversations that we don't pick up on because we didn't study it. And there's so much supplemental reading. And, I have this whole episode on divorce. And I'm like, okay, so when does Jesus talk about divorce? Is divorce okay? When can you get divorced? And when I was talking to Dr. James Sedlicek about it, he was like, listen, at the time that those Pharisees and Sadducees went up to Jesus and tested him about like when can a woman or a man get divorced, there was like a political debate going on at that time between two different rabbis that they were essentially saying like, do you agree with Trump or Biden? Like that's essentially what was happening, of like this rabbi or this rabbi's outlook. And how do we know that? That's not outright said in the Bible. And so it's interesting to, go to a scholar and say, this is the verse, this is how I understand divorce, not okay ever, right? And then they explain it with all that color and context, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, usually by the end of the conversation, like, this isn't even about what I initially brought up. This is
Yeah.
a huge conversation. So that's one style of the podcast. Another style is, hey, how explain Noah? Explain the timeline. So was Noah a caveman? Were Adam and Eve cavemen? And I talked to geologists about it. Explain the flood. Was the flood actually global or was it local? And they can pull rock data and science to back that it was in fact global. And fossils, and just the way that the sediments have settled, and how they can study it, and how fossils arrive, and how we've seen actual evolution, and what that means for the definition of evolution, and the different takes on old earth versus young earth. And so the structure of the podcast is really, I ask a question that you probably wondered, and they answer it in the most well informed way. Um, but I try not to have a lot of chit chat. I don't personally like it when podcasts just like have 20 minutes of catch up. I like That's like a different type of podcast. For this one, we get right into the meat,
Yes.
and we just start asking the questions. And then by the end of it, you're in love with the scholar. And so it's like, all right, well, if you want to connect with them, you can take their class, you can buy their book, whatever it might be. And so I try to keep it. I mean, I think a lot of people enjoy following me on social media the most, because some people just don't like an hour long conversation, and I don't blame you. I love podcasts. I love them so much. I like listen to them on my walks and while I clean. But if you don't want to listen to a podcast for an hour, Instagram, I just pull the best 30 seconds of that
Yes.
podcast and I post it on social media. And then you kind
Mhm.
of get like just that question and answer right away. And people really like that. But I think at the end of the day, like, people aren't prepared for some of the answers that we get from scholars.
It's amazing. And most people are on their phone and especially on TikTok. And then the algorithm really likes playing with the devil because you are looking for shoes. It gives you shoes. And then it takes you somewhere. And then, so it's amazing the way you're cutting it. And then when someone just bumps into you and you speak something, it stays with them, and you preach to them. So it's like it's a ministry in itself, and it's quite amazing. You remind me of a guest whom I had. His name was James Brown. Might he have come to your podcast?
James Brown?
Yes, he has written a book about the prophecy, the three proofs of God, something to do with Daniel 9:9:9:25, I think.
Oh, no, I haven't had a James Brown on my show.
I tell you the truth. That sounds like one of your guests whom I
Yeah,
would
no,
want to see
I've done
that.
a lot of work on Daniel. I would love to have him on
Uh,
my show.
he has done this research. Is it done in line 2 or 9:25? The verse that talks about the coming of Jesus Christ. So he has done a research, in-depth research into the book of Daniel in that particular sense. And he has three proofs of God. The exact time Jesus came, something of the sort. Mathematics is called all professors and everything, and it's an interesting conversation. I haven't gotten hold of the book yet. I've been busy, not intentionally, but it's been just packed days. But that is a conversation which I would want to see in this your podcast, and
Yeah,
I will
please
subscribe
connect
to
me.
it, and you will unpack it, and you can see it in yourself that these conversations are attracting scholars, and there are
Yeah,
many scholars who are stuck on one rabbit hole in a way.
yeah.
You are
I
bringing
like
them
to
to
like
life because
I wouldn't say that like it's a mouthpiece kind of thing, because then like I'm
no,
not claiming to be a prophet, but there is like very sound theological people like James
yes,
Brown, or I've worked with Mark Clark,
mhm.
and they do all this work their entire life on Daniel. And then where does
Imagine.
it go? It doesn't reach us, the people that want that level of intellect, just kind of translated down, dumbed down a little bit, watered down just like a bit, because sometimes when you start throwing out eschatological and exegetical words, you're just like, I don't know what that means. But I think that it's nice that people like us connect with people like them, and put it into a medium that God's blessed us with, like podcasting, that other people get to benefit from their decades of research.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting the vibe of how podcast is flowing and the kind of guests that are coming in. Now, what are the, I don't, okay, you've answered that particular as we wind up. What are the challenges that you experienced when you started up? So that if you have a young lady somewhere who is aspiring to be like you, and they know they've seen visions, they they are piecing in together questions, and when someone has a question, there is an answer. And if someone is a human being has a question somewhere, an answer is always there from God. And they are not alone in that question. That's the strangest thing I found about this world. That's why when you Google something, especially on Quora, you will find 10 people with the same
Yeah.
experience. How do I roast my meat? My beef? Do I boil it first? Oh my God, I started it and it came so tough. So do I put spices? So same similarly. So tell us about this experience, because I had also my own challenges when setting up my podcast. So tell us what was the challenges when you started, from equipment, that kind of thing, to the point of you now being as a pro as you are with so many followers. So you can inspire that young lady who wants to be like you.
Well, thank you for that question. That's really near. I've never once thought anybody would want to be like me. So thanks for saying that. I would say, like, if a woman wants to start a podcast, I would like kind of buckle up and like enjoy it. It's going to
Mhm.
be a long process. It's not going to be instant. The fact that it has followers is just a blessing by God. And I would
Wow.
just enjoy the friendship that you're building with God. I would enjoy not finding answers and working hard to find answers. I would enjoy the questions, the answers that you get that don't make sense. I would enjoy the hate and the pushback you get online. I would enjoy the struggle of finding guests. Like, all of those things were very real for me at the first year. Tons and tons of online hate, but I got excited from that because I knew that that means like something good is happening. I really enjoyed it. Anytime I get a nice message, I screenshot it and I have a folder in my phone of all the nice messages. Um, Finding guests was like a make or break. There were times where I'm like, I have nobody to interview, so it's the end of the podcast. And that was like that was 6 months in, and I was like, hey God, would love some guests. And then like somebody would email me and be like, here's all my guests that I've interviewed. And it's insane. And then people start referring. I would say like you can control only a few things. So control your consistency,
Yeah,
control your integrity and your character, and don't show up as somebody else. Like, I think
yeah.
I've benefited from being so vulnerable and honest, even when people disagreed with it. But it's like, this is my thing. Like, this is for me. All of this is for me. Somebody exactly like me. Somebody like me who, I'm not the most modest person. Like, I love my body and I love how strong I am, and I'm not afraid to show it. But I also like
Mhm.
am very dumb, and I'm okay to admit that. But I'm also very strong minded and stubborn, and I think that is beneficial. And so this is all for like how does somebody like me get answers. I'm not trying to cater to a certain group. I'm trying to just help myself and bring others along the way. So I think just being really authentic there. But I think the one thing that you struggle with that no one tells you about is the spiritual attacks. And I knew that it would happen. That was fun. And it is fun. It keeps happening. It really doesn't stop. Oh, but,
Now I
it
know
was
you're doing the right kind of work of God. If you don't experience that, you're playing.
love it.
Give us one example of the biggest highlight of your career in podcasting, the biggest attack that you faced.
It's Satan, like it's so sneaky. It's never like, and I saw a demon. That's not it. It's So I started this, and then I was so casual about the podcast for the first year. I was like, sometimes posting, sometimes not. Like, I was so casual, and then I lost my job, and I was like, God, you don't love me because you're like like it was like an ego hit to lose my job, but I lost it, and I was like, okay, I'll just like go all in on the podcast, like, and then that'll pay me. Podcasting does not pay you,
No.
not for the first 5 years. First 5 years, no payment. And I'm in year two. And so you get it. So I had very big dreams. I was like, in 6 months, I'm gonna be making so much money. And I dedicated so much time to this podcast in 6 months. And it was like 10 hours a day that I was working on this. I was just creating content and building websites and building everything. And I was like, I'm gonna get rich. But the worst part was the spiritual attack because I would wake up, no job, thinking about, okay, what am I going to do for my time? I'm going to work on my like a podcast. I'm going to whatever. But the first thing that hit my head was, you're not good enough. You're destined for failure. There's nothing you can do that will achieve your goals because you're not meant for them. And I was like, ugh, I just woke up. I knew it wasn't God. I knew it wasn't me. Like, I have insecurities, but like that was so intense. And I was just like, God, can you tap in? Like, come on, I need you the minute I wake up. I need God to help me the minute I wake up because these feelings of like, you're not good enough is clearly a spiritual attack. And so that was one of them. That sucked. And so I just kind of had to wake up praying, which was crazy. So crazy. Um, Other spiritual attacks, yeah, I don't know, like definitely impacts my relationships a lot of like things come up there, but I would say like, so now I have a job, which is why I'm going to cut you off very soon,
Yes.
and you're great
Mhm.
for that. But I have a job, and the way that I got that job was by fasting. And I could talk all day long about fasting, but truly like, somebody was like, you should fast to get closer to the Lord, because I felt really jaded and distracted. Like that was kind of like my most recent spiritual attack, was like being overwhelmed and busy, but also uh, like kind of losing interest for the podcast of like, what do I do next? Like I have no idea where God wants me to take it. And so I'm just like praying and praying and praying. But someone's like, yeah, you should just like fast for 72 hours and get close to the Lord. And fasting was always weird because it was like, okay, so I stop eating and then God blesses me. And that's not it. Like fasting puts you in a place you've never been before. Never once have you gone without food for that long and your only resolve was to cry out to God. That's a different kind of cry than you've ever cried in your life. And so you see God differently. He reacts
Mhm.
differently. You experience him differently. And I did. I entered into that 72-hour fast with no job. I exited with a job. And my job is so cool. So it spiritual attacks, I would prepare for that, but I would also prepare for a faith that you've never seen before. Like it's so like the journey itself truly is so rewarding. Like I think I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life, whether or not it makes money, because this is
Amen.
the most important thing I've ever done.
That's the thing. That's why I was taking you on the roller coaster of the church and whether you're able to stand. Because when you start this work and you're doing the work of God, like in my case, sometimes electricity blows up outside for 4 days. I'm in the middle of editing. I can't sleep. I have to edit. I have to go and talk because that's the work. You have to speak the mind of God as it is. And
Yeah.
I just want to encourage you as well. It is normal, and it goes like that. If it doesn't happen, you're not doing anything. You're just talking and showing modeling, if I may. But that's the thing. So you don't stop. You go and you struggle with it like that. And I'm happy that you're still standing strong. And I don't
Thank
know,
you.
you'll never fail. You'll never fail with this thing because you'll continue like that. The studio will get big. So with the next, I know you had it somewhere. With the next 2 minutes, tell us two things. Uh, Tell us how people can support your podcast because I saw something of the sort. It's common sense, to give to the ministry. This is the ministry, right? Tell us how people can support your podcast, and then now you can tell us now the nice question about how you read your Bible from one Sunday to another. Just those two
Okay.
things, and then we'll
Yeah,
wind up.
no. I would love if you could support it. Right now I'm supporting it, and you can go to my website bibspeak.com, bibspeak.com,
Mhm.
and you can donate for $1 a month or $5 a month, preferably 5, but or you could give just once, and every dollar literally counts because I fund everything, and this is not cheap. Like you use a software that costs money. It costs money to
Mhm.
buy this mic.
Yes.
Everything that automates costs money, everything it takes. And so in order for it to make it work, like literally $1 does so much. And so I would recommend that people support me by going to my website and committing to at least $1 a month, bibspeak.com. Or if you can't afford that because times are tough, I totally understand. And just go to Spotify or YouTube. You can see everywhere that the podcast plays on my website and give it 5 stars. go and follow me on Instagram at This Is Biblically Speaking on Instagram, and that's me. I don't have a social media manager, so you can comment, you can DM. It's me responding, and we can connect. But even just following me, if you can't afford to donate, is also super helpful, and just kind of interact, because a lot of the questions that I use to guide my next topics are from questions that I get from people that are submitted via social media. So I love interacting with people. I'm always trying to improve the experience here and try to think of more resources and trying to think of where I want to take this next year. And I have a couple ideas on like what do I need to improve my faith? Like, what kind of tools are actually going to be beneficial? So that would be the best way to support, is to go to my website, bibspeak.com. And then, how do I read my Bible from Sunday to Sunday? I'm actually reading my Bible from front to back right now, and I'm enjoying the novel that it is,
Mhm.
because I think I've
Mhm.
been popping into this verse and taking this out of context my whole life. But reading it front to back truly shows like the story and history of the heritage that we've stepped into and the way that God shows up. And like, I think the Bible is just one endless pursuit of God coming back to his people despite them turning away from him, and the way that he works with them, and like learning about that God that we serve and how he has shown up for people. And I'm not far, I'm still in the Old Testament, so it's that God. My God. But like learning about David and like going into, it's like, oh, like it's nice to put it all into the same place versus like the story and the story, but like to see it in a through line. um it's wonderful. And it's always timely in a really weird way. Every time I open my Bible and I'm reading it chronologically or reading it front to back, it's always a story that matters that day for me. And that's just, to me, the epitome of how it's a living, breathing book, and that reads us.
Perfect. And as we wind up, the only thing I could tell you is simple. You, you know, you're a great woman, and there's greatness that is ahead. Why do I say this? Look at your age group and just figure out how many people are doing the same thing that you are doing right now. It's very few, and then all of them are following you. So whatever you're doing here is a whole ministry. You know, church was just meeting somewhere, and because there was no TV to watch and communicate. So for you to communicate with 10 people, you had to sit somewhere and then teach the Bible. But now you're sitting there all the way from Hawaii, and you're going to teach someone in Tanzania. I'm in Kenya. You know, so it's a ministry in a sense, and that's why it has to be supported, right? Like that. So it's a great thing that you're doing, and it has a lot of following, and we are all looking up to you. So that's why I mentioned. What do you tell that young girl? Because you are holding all of us in that line, and I'm happy to have. I'm not alone in this as well. I have someone like you to always exchange guests and teach these people, because you and I know we cannot sleep until we come and speak. That's when everything goes on. So I think we have 2 minutes. All I can request is if you have anything else to tell our viewers, what would you tell them?
I would say that there's no question too big for God to answer. I think that held me back for a long time, of like, well, why does God hate the gays? And like, why is, like those are questions that you can ask. And for a
Yes.
long time, I didn't think you could, because I might get an answer that would bring me away from God. Like, well, I don't like that answer, so I'm no longer going to be Christian, so I might as well not ask and live in ignorance. You don't have to live in ignorance. Our God is huge, unfathomably huge. You just might ask the wrong person who doesn't know the answer or might tell you the wrong answer. But seek and you shall find. Like, pursue this truth. I think it's like First James 5. Like, this is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but there is an answer. And it's usually like the prayer that always helps me is like, God, help me see this in the way that you see it. Like when I'm really struggling with my own sin, it's like, well, God, I love this, but you hate it. So show me why you hate it. And I think that we would get a lot further in our faith and knowing God, because that's the whole point here, if we were more, I want to say brave, like more courageous in our questions and more hearty in our pursuit of those answers. But there's no question that's off the table. Even the one that you're like, well, I don't like God because he thinks that this is wrong. It's like, okay, but understand why he thinks that's wrong, and then readjust yourself. And so, our God is so big. Our God is so loving, and there's no question too big for him.
Wonderful. Cassian, thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest.
Thank you,
And
Samuel.
I'm,
This
I'm
was so much
truly
fun.
honored because I can see how the future will look like, and I'll be counted as one of the people who have interviewed you, because it's a great ministry ahead.
Thank you
The-
so
it's a
much.
very you can see it. You know, I'm not lying to you. It's just there. You can see it. You see it. That's why you're doing it. You see because you see it, and I just want to confirm. I confirm it as well. It's a very so I'm honored to have you on board as well.
Thank you
And
so much.
yeah, to the listeners, I want to thank you for your patience, and I hope today you've learned something. And we will line up more guests like honorable as honorable as Cassian, and we will learn a lot as we continue. Don't worry about the next episodes in terms of Leviticus. We are still continuing with that, and I will cover as much ground as we can, depending on the resources that we get. But please, 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 if you are in Hawaii, I love that island. Subscribe to this podcast. I will also do it. All right.
Even if you're
If you're
not in
in,
Hawaii, like I'm on
even
YouTube as
if you're
well.
yes, if you are in anywhere and you're listening to us, you will get a lot of answers in from this side. Please do subscribe. I will list all the descriptions there, and it will be easier for you. Now, I think that marks the end of this wonderful episode. The title of it will be your podcast, and
Thank you.
all the links, because all of what we're doing here is to the glory of God. So thank you so much, Cassian.
Thank you, Samuel. This was a phenomenal conversation. I'm so grateful to be on your show.
Yay!